I never imagined that a single evening could shatter everything I believed about my love life. It was supposed to be perfect. Our anniversary eve wine night, a night I had carefully planned for weeks. I had set up candles, arranged the flowers, laid out the photo album I designed for Caleb, and opened a bottle of that Napa wine we had shared on our trip. Every little detail carried my love, my thoughtfulness, my devotion over 2 years. But then I heard it, not in admiration, not in warmth, not in the soft glow of our carefully arranged dining room. I heard my name, Olivia, carried through the laughter of Caleb and his friends, Jared, Troy, and Brandon, during their small friends' party. My heart froze mid-step, my hand still hovering over a candle. Olivia's sweet, Caleb slurred, voice tinted with drunken confidence, but I could do so much better. A knot twisted in my stomach, my breath caught. The world I had been carefully constructing, the 2 years of memories, the countless small gestures, the late nights crafting photo layouts, and the handwritten jokes in the margins, crumbled instantly. Caleb and his friends were dissecting me, casually, cruelly. They laughed as he explained why I was just temporary, safe, convenient, not husband material, a placeholder until someone better came along. I stood frozen, candle in hand, as their laughter echoed around the room. 2 years of shared dinners, weekend trips, quiet nights on the couch, heartfelt talks, all reduced to the casual judgment of a man who didn't truly see me, and a group of friends who didn't care enough to stop him. I quietly blew out the candles, the flame guttering as my chest tightened, tears stinging my eyes. I packed up the wine, the flowers, the photo album, the symbols of my devotion, and I walked out. No words, no explanations. Just the silent weight of knowing everything I thought was real was a lie. That night, I realized something terrifying. I had been in love with a version of Caleb that didn't exist, and he never truly saw me. Not for the woman I was, not for the effort I poured into our life together. I was just temporary. And in the quiet aftermath, I knew I had to make a choice. Let this truth crush me, or rise above it and reclaim the life I thought we were building together. I'm Olivia. I'm 29, a graphic designer with a messy apartment I love and a habit of overthinking everything. Caleb was 27 when we met, confident, charming, ambitious, with that easy smile that made you forget how guarded you were. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I was quietly sketching in the corner, a glass of wine in hand, while he made everyone laugh at the center of the room. I remember him noticing my notebook and saying, "That's impressive," with a spark in his eyes that made me blush. It was a small moment, but it made me feel seen. From that night, we were inseparable. Caleb had this way of making ordinary days feel special. Weekends spent wandering farmers markets, lazy afternoons at bookstores, the little rituals we built together, morning coffee on the balcony, sharing playlists, sending silly memes across town during workdays. Those early months were intoxicating. He laughed at my awkward jokes, made me feel smart, safe, chosen. I wanted to believe he would always see me that way. I tried to integrate into his world. His friends, Jared, Troy, and Brandon, were loud, opinionated, and competitive in a way I wasn't used to. At first, their teasing amused me, but over time, I noticed subtle things. The way Caleb's stories about us would gloss over my contributions, the way he seemed to minimize my opinions when his friends were around. I brushed it off. They're just guys, I told myself. He loves me. That's what matters. His family added another layer. Caleb's mother was sweet but quietly critical. She had ideas about the perfect partner for her son. His father was distant, always traveling, leaving Caleb to manage expectations himself. I wanted to fit in, to show that I could be the partner they hoped for, but I was always a little outside, trying too hard to be enough. And yet, I ignored the little signs. The way he sometimes didn't introduce me fully to colleagues, the way he would roll his eyes at my suggestions for our future, the fleeting dismissals that felt harmless at the time. Looking back, those were the cracks in the foundation, the whispers of something deeper that I didn't want to acknowledge. I wanted to believe in the romantic story we were building, even as the edges frayed. We had our first big fight about 6 months in. It was minor, an argument over a dinner plan, but I remember how quickly it escalated and how quickly he shrugged it off afterward, acting as if nothing mattered as long as the mood returned to laughter. I internalized it. I told myself that I was overreacting, that love meant patience, compromise, forgiveness. I thought I was being mature. I now see I was being blind. Over 2 years, we accumulated a history, shared trips, late night drives, holiday dinners. I loved planning small surprises for him, and he sometimes returned the gesture, though not with the same thoughtfulness. I thought I was reading the signs of love correctly. I thought I was his partner. I was safe, convenient, a placeholder he could rely on while he figured out the right path for himself. Even his friends' parties, the casual gatherings I used to enjoy, were subtly revealing. I noticed the way Caleb would joke about my personality in a way that made me second guess myself, or the way his friends would nod knowingly at his comments, pretending it was harmless banter. I thought it was harmless, that I was imagining things. I wanted to believe that love could excuse these little hints of disregard. And yet, every memory now carries a shadow, the quiet moments of exclusion, the subtle dismissals, the jokes at my expense I once laughed off. They were all clues. I just didn't see them, not until the night I overheard the truth, the night our entire 2-year story unraveled in a single, brutal conversation. After 2 years of feeling safe in our little bubble, subtle cracks started appearing. I first noticed it during one of those casual friends' parties. Caleb, Jared, Troy, and Brandon laughing around the kitchen. Caleb leaning into their jokes in a way that made me feel like an outsider. At first, I dismissed it. They're just close friends, I told myself, sipping my wine, trying to smile. But the nagging feeling grew. He would make offhand comments that stung more than he realized. Olivia's sweet, but you know she's not ambitious like us, Troy said once, nudging Caleb, his laughter ringing in my ears. Caleb chuckled, but I caught the shadow in his eyes, a fleeting smirk that made me wonder if he agreed. My stomach twisted. Was I overthinking, or was there truth in his words? Small things accumulated. Caleb became quieter about our plans when his friends were around. He would change the subject if I mentioned future trips or moving in together. He started disappearing for work drinks or late-night meetups with the guys, returning home later than usual without explanation. I tried to be patient, rationalizing that he had a busy job, that friendships mattered, but the feeling of being peripheral, of being observed rather than included, was growing unbearable. I even noticed how his friends treated me differently. Jared would smirk when Caleb described my quirks. Brandon would nod knowingly when Caleb laughed about my career choices, and Troy would glance at Caleb as if seeking confirmation before speaking. They weren't hostile exactly, but there was a subtle consensus forming in the background, one that didn't have me in mind. I realized later they were the silent enforcers of Caleb's unspoken hierarchy. Me, safe and sweet, but never the challenge, never the partner they envisioned. At the same time, Caleb himself began showing small signs of withdrawal. He still smiled at me, held my hand, and kissed me on occasion, but there was a mechanical quality to it. The spark we once shared, the playful teasing, the shared glances, the inside jokes, faded. He laughed less at my jokes, seemed impatient when I shared stories, and increasingly avoided talking about long-term plans. I couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe he was stressed at work. Maybe I was imagining things. But my gut told me otherwise. It whispered the truth I didn't want to face. I wasn't fully seen, fully wanted. Every time Caleb's friends laughed at his jokes about safe relationships or temporary partners, a little piece of me shrank, afraid of being exposed for the first time. I began replaying interactions, analyzing tones, overthinking his every word and glance. Anxiety settled in, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Looking back, I can see the pattern. These weren't isolated incidents. The jokes, the dismissals, the changes in his behavior, they were all seeds of the conflict that would eventually bloom. I wanted to believe in our love story, the life we had built together. I wanted to cling to the belief that Caleb's actions didn't mean what my instincts screamed they did. I tried talking to him. "Caleb, do you feel like something's changed between us?" I asked one night, after a particularly awkward dinner with the guys. He shrugged, distracted, brushing it off with a casual, "No, I'm fine. Don't overthink it." But I couldn't ignore it. I felt invisible, a supporting character in the story I thought was mine. Those nights were heavy with unspoken truths. I began to notice the quiet moments before the laughter, the way Caleb's friends exchanged glances, the tiny smirks and half-suppressed chuckles. They were subtle, but they built a tension I couldn't shake. Each encounter left me drained, questioning my worth, and wondering whether love was ever meant to feel this way, or if I was simply being tolerated until something better came along. By the time our anniversary approached, the seeds had taken root. I sensed a storm brewing beneath the surface, a tension I could no longer ignore, and yet I still hoped, still believed, that love would protect us, that 2 years of history meant something. Little did I know, the storm was already gathering strength, ready to sweep away everything I thought I knew. The night of our anniversary arrived, and I was trembling, not with excitement, but with a faint, creeping anxiety I couldn't shake. I had spent the afternoon meticulously setting up our dining room, candles flickering softly, the table adorned with our favorite dishes, the Napa wine chilling just right, and the photo album I had crafted over weeks waiting to be opened. Every detail was a testament to 2 years of love and shared memories. Caleb was at the friends' party, Jared, Troy, and Brandon laughing boisterously in the living room. I had expected a little noise, maybe some teasing, but I wasn't prepared for what I heard next. My name, carried on Caleb's voice, cut through the laughter like a knife. "Olivia's sweet, I guess," Caleb said, voice slurred but filled with an unsettling confidence. But honestly, I could do so much better. The room spun. My hand froze on the candle lighter, a flame half lit, casting quivering shadows across the carefully arranged table. I could hear the others' voices echoing behind him. "Look at him," Troy continued, smirking. "He makes good money, lives in a nice apartment. But where's the spark? Where's the challenge?" "I mean, she adores you," Brandon added, attempting to soften the blow, but the words only made the insult sharper. "The problem," Caleb said, leaning back with a casual shrug, "is she's safe. Too safe. And I'm not ready for marriage, not ready for kids. I just like keeping my options open while I figure out what I actually want." My stomach dropped. I could feel my knees weaken. My chest tightened, each heartbeat thudding painfully in my ears. 2 years, every little gift, every shared joke, every night spent planning our future, reduced to a casual, cruel assessment in front of friends. I remember the sound of my own shallow breathing, the metallic taste of panic in my mouth. I wanted to scream, to demand he stop, to pull him aside and ask, "Is this really how you feel?" But my voice was gone, lost in a whirlwind of betrayal and disbelief. Caleb laughed, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "He probably has something elaborate planned tonight," Troy added. "Poor guy has no idea how out of his league she is." Every word was a knife twisting in my chest. Out of my league. Temporary. Safe. Not wife material. My hands shook as I set the candle down, trying to steady myself. I had envisioned this evening as a celebration of us, of love, of connection. Instead, it was the night I realized I had been playing a role in someone else's story, a placeholder until something better came along. I silently packed up the photo album, carefully sliding the pages back into their box. The wine bottle, carefully chosen, went back into the bag. The flowers I had bought, delicate and fresh, I tossed into the trash with a hollow sense of ritual. Each gesture was a quiet acknowledgement. This was not my story anymore. I slipped out the back door, leaving no note, no explanation, no dramatic scene, just the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, the cool night air a stark contrast to the fire burning inside. My mind raced, analyzing every laugh, every glance, every subtle dismissal I had once brushed off as harmless. All of it pointed to the same truth. I was not the woman he wanted. I was the convenient choice, a placeholder to be discarded when something better arrived. That night, I drove without direction, letting the dark streets of the city blur past me. I ended up at my brother Liam's apartment in Seattle, where I recounted everything over beers on his deck. He listened silently, letting me unravel, letting me bleed the words I hadn't dared to speak aloud. "She just told you who she is," he finally said, voice low, "and how she sees you. What are you going to do with that information?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I had thought love meant patience, compromise, giving everything for someone else. Now I realized that love also meant seeing clearly, even when the truth hurt more than I could bear. For the first time in months, clarity pierced through the fog of heartbreak. I knew, with a painful certainty, that the story I had believed in, our story, was never mine to keep. The morning after I left Caleb's apartment, I sat on my brother Liam's couch, staring at the city skyline through the wide glass windows. My hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, the steam rising lazily, a stark contrast to the storm churning inside me. I felt hollow, drained, yet curiously alert. Every memory of the night before played in my mind in vivid, sharp frames. Caleb's laughter, the casual cruelty of his words, the way his friends nodded as if confirming my status as temporary. I kept asking myself, what did I miss? How could I have been so blind? My mind sifted through every interaction, every smile, every subtle comment, trying to find signs I had overlooked. I remembered moments that now seemed like warnings. The way Caleb avoided introducing me to colleagues properly, the way he brushed off my ideas for future trips, the fleeting annoyance whenever I shared personal victories. I had excused them all, telling myself I was overthinking, but overthinking wasn't the problem. Seeing clearly had been the problem. I felt the weight of 2 years pressing down on me. 2 years of dinners, of late-night drives, of carefully planned surprises, of my heart stretched thin in the hope of reciprocity. And in a single evening, the illusion had shattered. The thought made me ache with a strange combination of grief and clarity. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was disoriented, hurt, but also oddly liberated. Liam broke the silence after a long pause. "You know what's hardest?" he asked, eyes fixed on mine. "It's realizing you've been trying to earn someone's love instead of being chosen, and you did it for 2 years." I swallowed hard. He was right. I had poured myself into this relationship, shaping myself to fit the mold Caleb seemed to want, anticipating his needs, crafting every gesture with precision, all in the hope of being chosen. And yet he had never truly chosen me. I felt a mix of shame and relief. Shame for not seeing it sooner, relief that the truth was finally undeniable. I thought about the anniversary surprise, the photo album, the wine, the carefully arranged dinner. I had imagined the joy on his face, the warmth of shared memories, the affirmation of our love. Instead, it had been met with laughter, judgment, and dismissal. My efforts, once symbols of my affection, now felt like evidence of my naivety. I remembered the way Caleb's friends had reacted. Jared, Troy, Brandon, nodding along, confirming what he said, reinforcing my role as a placeholder. The betrayal wasn't just his. It was shared, validated by those who should have been by my side in that moment. I realized then that this had been months in the making. The party, the laughter, the subtle exclusions, all signs of a deeper pattern I had ignored in the name of love. I started to write in my notebook, a habit I had long abandoned. Words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. 2 years of believing, 2 years of hope, 2 years of love, wasted on someone who never truly wanted me. Writing didn't fix the pain, but it allowed me to observe it, to hold it in my hands and examine it without judgment. Later that morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Caleb in anger, not yet. I needed clarity, perspective, and the space to process my emotions fully. I wanted to understand what had happened, why I had allowed myself to be treated as temporary, and how I could reclaim my sense of self. I realized that this confrontation wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about protecting myself, about refusing to invest further in a relationship that had always been one-sided. Throughout the day, I oscillated between sadness and quiet determination. I replayed the scene repeatedly, imagining different outcomes, different reactions. I felt my heart ache, yes, but also a subtle strengthening of resolve. For the first time in years, I acknowledged a simple truth. I deserved to be chosen wholeheartedly, not tolerated temporarily. By evening, I sat on the balcony with Liam, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. "I'm not sure what comes next," I confessed. "I don't even know if I want him back or if I should want him at all." Liam nodded knowingly. "You're asking the right questions," he said, "and it's okay not to have answers yet. What matters is that you don't lose yourself trying to fit into someone else's life. You've already given so much. Now it's time to see if he gives as much back, and if he doesn't, you'll survive, stronger than before." That night, I slept fitfully, dreams tangled with flashes of laughter, broken promises, and the image of Caleb smiling with a cruel ease I couldn't reconcile. But underneath the exhaustion was a quiet ember of resolve, a nascent understanding that my worth was not contingent on someone else's approval, not even Caleb's. The reaction was complete. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a scene of shouting or tears, but a deep internal reckoning. I had faced the truth, felt the full weight of betrayal, and begun the process of reclaiming my autonomy. I knew the path ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult choices and emotional turbulence, but I also knew I was ready to navigate it on my own terms. The days following the anniversary debacle were a whirlwind of tension and subtle warfare. Caleb hadn't reached out directly, but his presence lingered in every text, every social media update, every mutual friend's cautious inquiries. At first, I tried to maintain my calm, telling myself I was processing, that I deserved clarity before responding. But the world around me seemed to conspire to pull me back into chaos. His family, especially his mother, began inserting themselves almost immediately. I received a message from his mom, soft and carefully worded. "Olivia, darling, we're worried. Caleb is upset. Can you meet for coffee so we can talk?" Beneath the surface politeness, there was a tone of pressure I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just concern. It was an expectation that I should smooth things over, that I should acquiesce to Caleb's world and restore harmony. I declined politely, citing work commitments, but the message left a bitter taste. It was the first sign that my boundaries were going to be tested in ways I hadn't anticipated. Caleb's mother, subtle yet insistent, became a force I had to navigate carefully, as if my rejection of his son's behavior had somehow offended the entire family unit. Meanwhile, his friends, Caleb, Jared, Troy, and Brandon, continued their quiet campaign. Messages filtered through indirect channels, mutual friends casually mentioning Caleb's disappointment, joking remarks about overreacting girlfriends, and subtle digs disguised as concern. It was exhausting. Every interaction, every casual word, carried weight. I found myself walking on eggshells, analyzing motives, guarding against another unexpected verbal ambush. Then came the direct escalation. One evening, I received a call from Caleb. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed, but each word was carefully chosen to manipulate. "Olivia, can we talk?" he began. "I think we already did," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "You heard me wrong. You're overreacting. That night was just friends, alcohol. Don't let it ruin what we have," he said. "Friends laughing at someone's temporary status isn't harmless, Caleb. That's not overreacting. That's reality," I responded, trying to keep my tone calm. He sighed audibly, a deliberate attempt at exasperation. "I just don't understand why you're making this bigger than it is. Can't we just move on?" I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline spike in my chest. "Move on? You called me safe, temporary, not wife material. You laughed about how out of my league I am, and you expect me to move on? That's not how trust works, Caleb." The silence on the other end was telling. He was speechless, not because he hadn't thought about it, but because he hadn't anticipated a confrontation that wasn't dominated by guilt or flattery. The shift in power was subtle but undeniable. Days later, the situation worsened. Evidence of his detachment accumulated. Messages I overheard from mutual friends discussing his growing interest in someone else, vague posts on social media hinting at his pursuit of excitement elsewhere. Photos of him attending events I wasn't invited to. Each piece of information hit me like a fresh wave of betrayal. I tried to maintain composure at work and in public, but privately, I grappled with a mix of grief and indignation. My home felt different. Every familiar object, every photograph, became a reminder of a love that had never been reciprocal. The anniversary photo album, still tucked away, seemed heavier, each page a monument to my misplaced devotion. Caleb's family intensified their pressure. His mother called again, more insistently this time. "Olivia, please. You have to understand. Caleb is under a lot of stress. We just want him happy. Isn't that what matters?" The implied expectation was clear. I was supposed to compromise, to forgive, to smooth over the cracks in his life, while my own feelings, my own heartbreak, were sidelined. I realized then that the escalation wasn't just about Caleb's behavior. It was about the network surrounding him, the social reinforcement that validated his disregard for my emotions. I confronted him again, in person this time. The air between us was taut with tension, my pulse thudding in my ears. "Why involve everyone?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my effort to remain calm. "Because I care about you, Olivia," he replied, leaning forward, eyes searching mine. "I don't want to fight. Can't we just fix this quietly?" "Fix what, Caleb? You told your friends out loud exactly how you feel. You don't get to erase that with a few reassurances now." His lips pressed into a thin line. The conversation spiraled into an exhausting cycle, him attempting to minimize, me attempting to assert boundaries. Every word, every gesture, every defensive maneuver escalated the tension further. I felt like I was wading through quicksand. Each step forward met with resistance, each attempt at stability undermined by his and his social circle's manipulations. The breaking point came when a mutual friend, trying to mediate, inadvertently confirmed my worst fears. "He's really confused, Olivia, but you have to understand, he's under pressure from everyone. He doesn't know what to do." I laughed bitterly, a hollow, sharp sound that cut through the room. "Pressure? The pressure is on me, then?" "The pressure is on me to justify my love, to forgive being treated as a placeholder, to navigate your entire social circle's expectations. That's not love. That's control." From that moment, the escalation became almost unbearable. The constant interference, the subtle manipulations, and the avalanche of half-truths and gossip left me drained, furious, and resolute. I knew something had to change. I couldn't allow myself to be diminished any further. Yet beneath the fury, a strange clarity emerged. I saw the pattern, I understood the dynamics, and I knew that my response would determine my dignity, my self-respect, and ultimately, my liberation. The week following the escalation was a descent into a kind of emotional darkness I hadn't anticipated. My apartment, once a sanctuary filled with light and quiet comfort, felt alien and suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, crowded with memories of laughter, shared meals, and whispered plans. Every photograph, every memento, every little token of our 2 years together now felt like a reminder of betrayal, a life I had imagined that had never truly existed. I found myself replaying the scene over and over. Caleb's laughter at my expense, the voices of his friends confirming my role as temporary, the casual cruelty of their consensus. The anniversary setup, meticulously planned, was reduced in my mind to a monument of my naivety. Even the bottle of wine I had chosen, the carefully arranged candles, the photo album filled with hours of my creative energy, they all felt like symbols of my failure to see reality. Sleep became elusive. Nights were spent staring at the ceiling, tracing the shadows with my eyes, listening for sounds that weren't there. Every vibration of my phone sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Would it be Caleb? Another message from his mother? A friend inadvertently trying to help mediate? I avoided calls and texts, isolating myself further, but the solitude only magnified the pain. I began to question everything about myself. Was I too naive? Too trusting? Too willing to bend and shape myself to fit someone else's ideal? Memories of moments I had overlooked or excused now became evidence of my supposed shortcomings. Each one cut deeper than the last, and for the first time in years, I felt utterly powerless. Even my brother Liam's reassurances offered only partial comfort. Sitting on his couch, I felt the weight of my helplessness. "It's not about you being too much, Olivia," he said softly. "It's about him not being capable of valuing you. But it still hurts, doesn't it?" I nodded mutely. It did hurt. It hurt in my chest, in my hands, in the ache behind my eyes. Every heartbeat seemed heavy with betrayal. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake the world until it made sense again. But the anger was hollow. It lacked the power to undo the damage. Outside, life went on. Neighbors walked past my window, indifferent to the storm raging inside me. Friends sent occasional messages, checking in, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I was enveloped in a fog of grief, confusion, and disbelief. The sense of being seen, truly seen, had vanished, replaced with the stark reality that I had been treated as expendable, as someone to occupy space until someone better came along. One afternoon, I wandered through the city streets, unseeing, my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets, my mind trapped in an endless loop. I watched couples laughing, friends hugging, strangers holding hands, and a hollow ache twisted in my chest. The world seemed simultaneously vibrant and cruel, a paradox I couldn't reconcile. The life I had imagined with Caleb, quiet dinners, weekend trips, shared jokes, had dissolved into an illusion. The lowest moment came late that night, alone on my balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly before me. I felt an intense, almost paralyzing loneliness. My chest tightened, my thoughts raced, and a single, bitter truth anchored itself in my mind. I had been living a lie, and the lie had been woven by someone I trusted completely. Tears came unbidden, falling silently onto my hands as I gripped the railing. I thought about calling him, confronting him one last time, demanding closure. But I knew deep down it would change nothing. There was no apology that could undo the years of subtle dismissal, no words that could erase the humiliation, no explanation that could validate the love I had given and not received. In that dark moment, I realized that the pain wasn't just about Caleb. It was about the erosion of my own sense of worth, the way I had allowed myself to be defined by someone else's appraisal. For years, I had sought validation externally, bending, molding, performing. And now, in the absence of reciprocated affection, I faced the raw, unfiltered reality of what that had cost me. Yet, even amidst the despair, a small ember of clarity flickered. I recognized that this darkness, as suffocating as it felt, was also a crucible. It was exposing every fracture, every self-doubt, every vulnerability, but it was also offering me a chance to confront them, to grieve fully, to acknowledge the pain without letting it consume me entirely. I stayed on the balcony long into the night, letting the cool wind wash over me, the city lights twinkling like distant, indifferent stars. In the stillness, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would survive this. I would reclaim my sense of self, piece by piece. And someday, I would no longer be defined by someone else's inability to choose me. That night, I didn't have solutions. I didn't have closure. I didn't even have answers. But I had a resolve that I hadn't felt in years, a determination to confront the reality, no matter how painful, and to emerge stronger. The dark moment had arrived, as all dark moments do, to test endurance, and though I was at the bottom, I knew the path upward awaited. The morning after my lowest night, I woke with a lingering heaviness in my chest, but also with a surprising clarity. The fog of confusion and self-doubt hadn't entirely lifted, yet a small, insistent voice whispered, "You deserve honesty, you deserve respect, and you deserve someone who chooses you fully." I decided to take deliberate action. No impulsive confrontations, no passive waiting. First, I revisited every message, every voicemail, every text from Caleb, his friends, and his family. I traced patterns, cross-referenced timelines, and noticed details I had initially overlooked. Every casual remark from his friends, every subtle shift in his tone during calls, every half-hearted excuse now painted a consistent picture. Caleb had never truly valued me as an equal partner. Then came an unexpected ally, Liam. He had flown back for the weekend, sensing that I needed support, not advice. Over coffee, he said, "Olivia, you don't have to keep this bottled up anymore. Look at the evidence. You know the truth. Sometimes having someone outside the situation confirm your perspective is all you need." I nodded, grateful for his perspective. Together, we reviewed screenshots of the conversation from the anniversary night, messages exchanged by Caleb with his friends, and subtle social media interactions I had dismissed as trivial. Each piece reinforced what I had suspected but had struggled to articulate. The betrayal wasn't a single night, a single mistake. It was a pattern, a reality I had to confront fully. With this newfound clarity, I felt a subtle shift within me. My anger remained, simmering beneath the surface, but it was now tempered by resolve rather than confusion. I was no longer a passive participant in someone else's narrative. I had observed, documented, and analyzed. I understood the dynamics. And, most importantly, I recognized my worth. That afternoon, I called Caleb. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. My tone was calm, measured, and unflinchingly honest. "Caleb," I began, "I've reviewed everything, and I think it's time to be completely clear. That night, the things you said to your friends, they weren't mistakes and they weren't alcohol talking. They revealed exactly how you view our relationship. temporary, convenient, not real. I won't let that continue. I won't be your placeholder anymore. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear him weighing his words, searching for a way to spin or excuse himself. But I didn't wait for him to justify or deny. I've realized something important, I continued, feeling a calm strength settle in my chest. I deserve someone who sees me as irreplaceable, not as a stopgap. I deserve respect, honesty, and partnership. And if you can't give that, then this, us, has to end. The line went silent for a moment longer. Then Caleb muttered something inaudible, likely an attempt at mitigation. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My decision was made, and my voice, steady and unwavering, carried the weight of that resolution. After the call, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow. Relief that I had spoken my truth. Sorrow for the years spent investing in someone incapable of returning that investment fully. Yet even in that sorrow, there was empowerment. I had reclaimed my agency. I had confronted the reality of the situation with honesty, not denial or avoidance. Over the next few days, I began to enforce boundaries more rigorously. I limited contact with Caleb and his friends, redirected conversations that veered toward guilt tripping, and refused to engage in debates about whether I had overreacted. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of their collective judgment lift, replaced by the clarity of my own standards. A particularly pivotal moment occurred when Liam casually remarked, "You're not just walking away, Olivia, you're walking toward yourself." That statement resonated deeply. I realized that the turning point wasn't just about ending a toxic relationship, it was about reclaiming my sense of self, recognizing my worth independently of anyone else's perception. The validation I had been seeking externally now came from within. I started journaling, meticulously documenting my feelings, my reflections, and my plans. Each entry reinforced the lesson that had crystallized over weeks of heartache. Love isn't about performance, sacrifice, or bending to someone else's ideal. It's about mutual respect, shared vision, and recognition of each other's intrinsic value. In the evenings, I allowed myself to sit in the quiet of my apartment. No distractions, no excuses. I replayed the anniversary night, not with self-blame, but with analytical clarity. Each misstep of Caleb's behavior became evidence, not justification for regret. I acknowledged the pain fully, without letting it dictate my identity or my future. By the end of that week, the transformation was subtle but undeniable. I felt a steadier rhythm in my heartbeat, a clearer sense of priorities, a renewed confidence in my judgment. I had moved from reactive pain to proactive clarity. The turning point had arrived. It wasn't marked by dramatic confrontations, shocking revelations, or public vindication. It was quiet, internal, and powerful. The moment when I recognized that my value was inherent, that my happiness was not contingent on someone else's approval, and that I could step into the next chapter of my life with integrity, self-respect, and resilience. I looked at my reflection that evening, really looked, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Not at what I had lost, but at what I had regained. The woman who knew her worth, who could walk away without bitterness, and who could choose herself above all else. The days following my confrontation with Caleb were filled with a strange mix of quiet intensity and external turbulence. News of the split, though I hadn't broadcast it, seemed to ripple outward through mutual friends and inevitably into his family's ears. The social fallout was almost immediate, and I watched from a distance, detached but fully aware, as the consequences of his choices began to cascade around him. Caleb's friends, the same ones who had casually validated his dismissal of me as temporary, started to shift in subtle ways. Some, like Ryan, tried to defend him initially, offering tepid justifications. She overreacted. It wasn't that serious. But as details of that anniversary night and the candid revelations became clearer, even the most loyal began to hesitate. The casual laughter that had once accompanied their judgmental commentary dissolved into awkward silence when confronted with the reality of Caleb's behavior. His family, who had subtly pressured me over the years with their high expectations, reacted predictably but sharply. Calls and messages from his mother, once frequent with instructions and gentle advice, dried up entirely. I could sense a combination of disappointment and recognition. Caleb had mismanaged a situation that was entirely within his control, and now even those who had subtly supported him were recalibrating their allegiance. I watched from a distance, allowing the events to unfold without interference. There was a quiet satisfaction, not from malice, but from clarity. For once, the truth had a weight that could not be ignored. Caleb's carefully maintained image of control, charm, and superiority began to unravel, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in ways I hadn't seen before. Meanwhile, my own space, my apartment, felt transformed. The emptiness was no longer oppressive. Each object, each photograph, each memento of our time together now resonated as evidence of my strength rather than my naivety. I began to organize my life with deliberate intention, purging the items that kept me tethered to an illusion, preserving only those that reminded me of what I had accomplished, what I had felt, and what I had survived. One evening, I received a hesitant message from Ryan, one of Caleb's friends. It was short, but significant. "Olivia, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad it had been. You didn't deserve that." I didn't respond immediately. I read it several times, savoring the acknowledgement, letting it reinforce the perspective I had fought so hard to reclaim. Eventually, I replied with a brief but measured message. "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate your honesty." It felt like a subtle reclamation of power, not over Caleb, not over anyone else, but over my own narrative. I was no longer a passive participant in the story others had written for me. I was the author of my next chapter. Even Caleb's attempts to reconcile, sporadic and desperate, failed to pierce my resolve. He called, he texted, he showed up at places he thought I might be. Each time I remained composed, polite, but firm. I had no desire to rehash the past, to defend myself, or to justify my decisions. The power of silence and boundary setting became evident. My calm presence, my refusal to engage in drama, contrasted sharply with his flailing attempts to control perception. At work, I noticed whispers and sideways glances, subtle curiosity about the personal upheaval that had spilled into our professional circles. But instead of feeling embarrassed or vulnerable, I felt a quiet pride. I had faced an intensely personal betrayal, navigated it with integrity, and emerged not fractured, but whole. There was one particularly striking moment when I ran into Caleb at a local cafe. He approached, a nervous, awkward tension radiating from him. His attempt at casual conversation faltered almost immediately. He spoke quickly, searching for familiar territory, but I cut the interaction short, smiling faintly. "Caleb, I wish you well, but I'm moving forward. Take care of yourself." And I walked away. No argument, no lingering confrontation, just a composed, deliberate exit. The sensation was liberating. In that moment, I fully understood the power of detachment and the quiet force of self-respect. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. The natural consequences of his actions, his friend's reassessment, his family's disappointment, his own internal reckoning, were more than enough. Friends who had been on the periphery began to check in more consistently. Noah, who had always been quietly supportive, invited me for a weekend hike. Marcus sent a thoughtful note acknowledging the difficulty I had endured. Even small gestures reinforced the idea that my life didn't hinge on Caleb's validation or approval. I began to embrace routines that were purely my own: morning runs, journaling, cooking meals I loved, curating personal projects at work. The life I had nearly surrendered in pursuit of someone else's affection now became a landscape of personal growth and intentional joy. By the end of the month, Caleb's social image had fully shifted. Stories of his drunk honesty circulated in the same circles, casting him as careless and insensitive. I observed it quietly, without gloating, knowing that the fallout wasn't punishment I had enacted. It was simply the natural consequence of truth and integrity. And then, the moment of ultimate closure arrived. I packed my last few belongings associated with our shared memories, carefully, deliberately, and walked out of the apartment for the final time. The city streets welcomed me, alive with possibility and untainted by resentment. I felt a profound sense of calm, a clarity I hadn't known in years. I wasn't fleeing from pain. I was walking toward a life of my own design. As I left, I glanced back once, not with bitterness, but with a quiet acknowledgement. The chapter had ended, the lessons had been learned, and I was free. Free to define my worth, free to set my boundaries, and free to create a life unshackled from someone else's limitations. The fallout had run its course. Caleb, his friends, his family, each faced the consequences of their choices. And I, Olivia, emerged not as a victim, but as a woman who had navigated betrayal with courage, who had reclaimed her power, and who now stepped forward into a future defined solely by her own values and vision. The weeks after leaving Caleb were quieter than I expected, but in that quiet I found a space to breathe, to reflect, and to heal. At first, the apartment felt oddly empty, without reminders of him, yet that emptiness quickly transformed into freedom. Each corner, each object, became a testament to my choices, proof that I could reclaim my life on my own terms. Therapy sessions continued, now less about untangling immediate pain, and more about understanding patterns in my life. I realized I had spent years seeking validation externally, trying to earn love through gestures, effort, and compromise, rather than recognizing my inherent worth. I started to appreciate that real love isn't transactional. It's reciprocal, respectful, and effortless in the right ways. I reconnected with friends who had always supported me quietly, those who had spoken truths gently, like Noah and Brooke. Their presence reminded me that relationships, romantic or otherwise, should uplift, not diminish. I also allowed myself to slowly engage in life's pleasures again, long hikes, coffee with friends, painting afternoons, all things I had neglected while focused on being enough for someone else. Then there was Alex, the man I met casually at a gallery opening. He was different, not because he was perfect, but because around him I didn't feel the need to perform. Conversations flowed naturally, laughter was genuine, and I realized the relief of being chosen, rather than constantly proving my worth. I took it slow, savoring the feeling of being valued simply for being me. Reflecting on the past, I understood the deeper lesson. Love isn't about grand gestures or being the perfect partner. It's about being seen, respected, and cherished for who you are. I didn't need Caleb's approval, his validation, or even his presence to define my happiness. My worth was never conditional, and now I lived as though it never could be. On a quiet Sunday morning, I walked through the park near my apartment, sunlight filtering through the trees. I thought about everything, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the fallout, and felt a calm sense of triumph. Not because I had won over someone else, but because I had chosen myself. To anyone watching, I would say this: don't settle for someone who views you as temporary. Don't bend to earn love that should be freely given. Protect your heart, honor your value, and remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's the foundation for every healthy relationship to come. And with that, I stepped forward, not defined by loss, but empowered by clarity, strength, and self-respect. My story didn't end with heartbreak. It ended with me finally becoming the person I was always meant to be.